jumping on today.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. What could be better than doing this on a Friday afternoon?
Well, that's I can't think of much better stuff. And I'm really grateful to have you on. Obviously I've followed your journey for a lot of years, and I certainly appreciate it. And I'm interested as I have guests on, and everyone has varying backgrounds. You obviously have a very rich background and kind of out there a lot. I thought I'd take up maybe a little different angle. Obviously, this is about getting started and all the different things, whether it's an entrepreneur or someone else just kind of jumping into things. So I thought maybe to go some different, maybe go to the edges with you, try to get into some stuff maybe folks don't know, and then we'll jump around as I like to do here. So I thought I'd start here if we can. You have something on LinkedIn several years ago where you started surfing at 62.
60.
And you said in 5 years, you wanted to be able to surf waves bigger than you. So I'm curious, now it's been about 5 years. Talk to me about the journey of surfing and being that beginner learner again.
If you bend your knees far enough, then the waves are equal to your height. I took up surfing at about 60, and I'm 67 now. And I took it up because mostly my daughter took it up, although all my kids surf, but my daughter is really an enthusiastic surfer. And I just fell in love with surfing. I moved because of surfing. I've changed houses because of surfing. I must own a dozen boards. I surf every day. After this, I'm going to surf. I don't know why I scheduled you at prime, low tide. That was just an unforeseen.
Well, I appreciate that.
If I had hindsight, I would have scheduled you at high tide, because where I surf, low tide is better to surf. So
what made you get in? I mean, because obviously you waited a lot of years to get into that. Like, what was the spark that said, God, I got to try this? What I've been missing out?
My daughter started surfing. And so we went to Hawaii on a vacation. I started paddleboarding, and then people humiliated me for paddleboarding instead of surfing. So, one thing led to another. And now it would be honest to say it is an obsession.
So going back, because I'm always interested, especially someone like yourself with such a rich history, you have a lot of obviously experiences, to get on that board for the first time and be a beginner again.
Yeah.
Can you think back just a few years? Like, what was that like? What were some of the things you kind of the challenges you went through that might be helpful for folks out there getting started with anything?
Well, the bottom line is, I think it shows a lot of one's sort of perspective in life. And I would say that not many people would take up surfing at 62. In fact, among my peers, I would say that if they play a round of golf, they consider that strenuous exercise. Yeah. And so a lot of it is a learning mentality, that no matter how old you are, that you can still learn new skills. That's partially. Another one is you have to suck up your ego, because trust me when I tell you, for the first 5 years of surfing, maybe even the first 7, you don't look so good out there. So, if you are easily embarrassed and humiliated, you would just not take up something at such a late age. So that's partially, and you can apply these lessons to careers too, right? So if you've been a programmer all your life, and now at 60 you want to try marketing or sales, or you've been marketing and sales all your life and now you want to try programming or another industry, do you say to yourself, I'm too old, can't learn? Or do you say to yourself, I can learn? And do you say to yourself, so what if I look like a jerk for a few years? Eventually I'll achieve mastery. Not that I've achieved mastery, but I'm closer than I used to be.
How do you think I guess that mindset, because it's such a great mindset you have on it, how do you think you came to that? Was that something earlier in your life that always stuck with you? Or is that something later on? Did you kind of...
I don't know the answer to that question. It's not like I have been, giving up a lot of stuff, and by giving up, I mean sacrifice. I don't mean sacrificing. I mean giving up, meaning I give up. I can't do it. Yeah. On the other hand, I don't want to paint a picture that I am such a gritty person that I can accomplish anything, because that ain't true. So I don't know. Partially it's because I fell in love with it. So at 44, I fell in love with hockey. At 60, I fell in love with surfing. I would say that, most people would say at 44 is too late to take up hockey, having never skated before. And 60 is too late to take up surfing, having never surfed before. But not me.
Well, and I see this a lot. I mean, obviously I've been through this. Actually, as we're talking today is the 4-year anniversary of this podcast.
Yeah.
And, I think about, starting that and the fear and anxiety and all that stuff. But it seems like throughout your career, your life even, and you share whatever stories if you want to interject here, but it seems like you've always taken, like, you didn't just say like, I'm going to do this job and I worked that for 30 years. Like, it seems like you've kind of jumped to new things, new endeavors, things that kind of got you excited maybe. Would that be an accurate representation?
That would be very accurate. So there has been no overall lifetime plan. And I happen to fall in love with Macintosh. I happened to fall in love with entrepreneurship. So I started a few companies. I fell in love with speaking. I fell in love with podcasting most recently. So between podcasting and surfing, I don't have time for anything else. And I fell in love with Canva. I'm chief evangelist of Canva. So I have a lot on my plate for someone who is, quote unquote, semi-retired.
How have you liked the podcasting game? You've done over 100 episodes now, right?
Yeah, I love podcasting. I was born for podcasting. I wish I had taken it up earlier, but I wish I had taken up surfing and hockey earlier too. So I've been podcasting for about 2.5 years. And man, if I had taken up podcasting 5 years ago or 6 years ago, and when the pioneers did, I would own podcasting today. But it is not trivial to start podcasting late in the game, not in terms of my chronological age, but late in the game in terms of many of the podcasting winners have already been selected. And so you're trying to break into a crowded field as opposed to being a pioneer in the field. So listen, if you're Michelle Obama, you can start podcasting 5 years from now and you'll succeed. But for the rest of us, and I put myself in that category, it's definitely breaking through noise. It's not an easy thing.
What's been the hardest part of the podcasting journey for you?
By far, getting subscribers. My content, I would put my content up against anybody's. So there's content, and content means you have to book speakers, you have to edit it, all that kind of stuff. All that, I got that wired. That is no problem. The hardest part for me, and I would say, I bet you the hardest part for most podcasters, if they were honest, is how do you get subscribers? And I don't know the answer to that question yet.
It is challenging because I look at it again, been doing this for several years. It's like, and I'm a nobody, now I started from the bottom. But to your point, there's so much content out there. There's so many different avenues that you can be pulled. And I've talked to a lot of friends and family that rarely do they even listen to podcasts. I listen to hours each week on walks or working out or whatever. But I think I'm in kind of the exception, not the rule yet. So
I wish there were more people like you. Yeah.
Yeah. But to your point though, you have to have that thirst for knowledge, but then you also have to like that medium, because some people maybe want to watch videos or want to read articles. I enjoy the audio aspect to it. That's just how I learn.
And I enjoy editing. So I think if you want to be a good podcaster, you have to be a good editor. But having said that, I'm unusual because I think many podcasters, I don't know what your method is, but after I record, so I use something like what we're using, or we're using Zoom right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I use Squadcast because Squadcast is a double ender, i.e. there's two local recordings, yours and mine, whereas Zoom is all in the cloud. So from Squadcast, I get two WAV files. Those two WAV files are uploaded to Descript. Descript transcribes them. And with Descript, I don't know if you use Descript, but Descript, you get a written transcription. And if you edit the transcription, you are editing the audio. So you have to wrap your mind around that. That is a key feature. So when I select the word in Descript text and I delete that word, the audio is deleted too. So I would spend hours editing, and then a sound designer takes his whack at it. And so I would say for a 1 hour episode of Remarkable People, there's probably maybe 4 or 5 hours of editing in it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Whereas some people believe you just turn on the recorder and it's, true to life. What you see is what you get. Everything is recorded and played. And I do a lot of editing. My podcast is called Remarkable People. So I think it's my responsibility to make my guests seem as remarkable as possible. And one of the things that makes people seem less remarkable than they are is some of them are not natural interviewees. And so they say and well, and and see, I did it just now. And so I take almost all of those out. Okay. And I can tell you in 1 hour, you'd be surprised that some of the people you interview in 1 hour, they say well, or 300 times.
Yeah. It's so interesting, the perspective on it, now that we're kind of getting down this rabbit hole, because I take the opposite approach.
Yeah.
I rarely edit because I like I'll use the word authentic just for lack of a better vocabulary right now, but I kind of like because again, the whole point of getting started is there's a lot of folks that are on that curve where it's like, they're just getting over the edge and they haven't started. So I want them to hear like, hey, Guy Kawasaki, he says ums and ohs, and hey, he's a human being just like any of us.
Yeah. So, I understand this. Your audience are all podcasters, beginning podcasters.
No, a lot of the audience are entrepreneurs, business owners. Yeah. A lot of folks that are kind of looking to kind of get that dose of inspiration to get started.
Yeah. It's just a different philosophy. I want people to listen to my podcast. And at the end of the podcast, I want every time, 52 times a year, I want them to say, my God, that was an articulate guest.
Yeah. And
saying 250 times that is not conducive to that conclusion.
That's a fair point. Well, how do you because obviously this is something I struggle with. Like, you only have so many guests. If you're doing one a week, how do you choose the guests that you want to have on?
Well, there's a shortage of remarkable people in the world. So it's not, this, actually, that's not true. There are more than 52 remarkable people a year. But I guess I'm looking for people who are remarkable. And it doesn't mean they're rich or famous. It just means that they're remarkable. So you can be a remarkable school teacher who's not worth $1 billion that no one has ever heard of, other than your school district or your school or your class. And that qualifies for me. You don't have to be Elon Musk to be on my podcast. Having said that, I have, Jane Goodall and Margaret Atwood and Steve Wozniak on my podcast. But I also have people you never would have heard of who snuck across the US-Mexico border. And now they're thriving middle manager at Adobe. I have people who have started facilities to help families who have kids with Down syndrome. Not everybody is, famous in the influencer sense of the word. I try to get a balance.
Yeah. Well, it's good. Just the fact that you're out there and you're putting in the effort, as you said, and you're like, hey, I love doing it. That's the most important thing, I think,
Yeah.
I think sharing those stories, because again, it's a new medium, even though it's been around for a lot of years, it is still new considering other stuff. So I want to jump around a little bit because I was kind of curious. One of the things that I love chatting about is how we start off life is not where we end up. There's a lot of these turning points. Yeah. And I actually wanted to pick up something that was, and maybe you've talked about this before. I haven't heard we talk about it, but around quitting law school. You went for, it looked like 2 weeks. Tell me about that time in your life. Like, was that the dream, if you will, or you said you were kind of doing it for your parents, but
yes. My parent, I'm Asian American. So back then your parents wanted you to be a doctor, lawyer, or dentist. And I just did not want to stick my hand in people's bodies. So that left law. And I could not stand law school. It was just, I was intimidated. It's scary. They would basically want to tell you that you're crap and I'm going to remake your brain. I just could not handle that.
Did you, when you were in that kind of period, because I know a lot of things I struggle with is like, whether it's parents or friends or family, the judging of like, wait a minute,
Mhm.
you're quitting law school, you're not doing it. Like, was that a tough
Oh
period
yeah.
for you
Oh,
to?
for an Asian American quitting law school for just, time for seppuku. I mean, yeah, it was hard. But my father, to my utter amazement, said, it's okay as long as you make something of your life by your mid-20s. So he gave me another 5 years to do something.
Well, at least you got a little opportunity there.
That's
Uh,
right. I mean, I have no regrets. I would have been a great lawyer, but it's not like I'm laying awake saying, "Oh God, if only I had been in law school, I would be happy." That is not true.
Well, what's interesting too is how kind of serendipity rears its head. And tell me, fact check me on this, but is it right that the opportunity with Apple came because of your roommate? Did I
Oh
read
yeah,
that right? Is that okay?
my
So I kind of look at
yeah.
serendipity. If you don't have that roommate,
It's
maybe
more.
that it.
Well, it's more than serendipity. It's nepotism. I mean, I was not qualified for that position. There's no if, ands, or buts. So the lesson there is not so much depend on nepotism. The lesson there is it doesn't matter how you get the job. What matters is what you do once you have it. Right. So, if you're like the boss's son or daughter and you get the job that way, okay. But then, what do you do with the position afterwards? Are you just living off your reputation or living off your family or living off your genetics? Or are you actually doing something? And that's the test.
Well, how do you think? Because if again, fact check me on the research here, but you mentioned some days you felt that you were going to be promoted and other days you're going to be fired. So like, how do you think you made it
Yeah, in the same day.
yeah. How do you think you made it in that group that kind of made it out and obviously became the chief evangelist and stuff like that? But how did you think,
Yeah.
what are some qualities you think that made that happen?
Well, dog shed luck was one thing. I think that, well, for sure, I loved Macintosh. That was true love, right? And my perspective is loving the product is much of the battle. And I truly loved and still love Macintosh. So that helped. And also, I was willing to grind it out. The work ethic was pounded into me. So that was not hard. Or, I mean, it was not hard to work hard because I had been trained to work hard. And also, I mean, let's just be honest. A lot of people like to talk about courage and grit and determination and blah blah blah, but I would say the single largest factor is just dumb shit luck. I mean, I was in the right place at the right time with the right friend. My parents sacrificed for my education. I wasn't born in the middle of a third world country, without electricity and water and all that. I mean, I wasn't a billionaire's kid, but in respect to the rest of the world, I hit the jackpot. Just being born, I hit the jackpot. And I came from a lower middle class family in Hawaii.
Did you have that? I'm fascinated by where you'll go with this, but do you have that perspective now looking back, or did you have that perspective then? Did that help you in your career going forward, kind of realizing, hey, listen, I'm grateful for just the opportunity here?
I think that I came to that later in my career. I mean, for a while, you're so full of yourself, you believe that you quote unquote deserve what you got, right? And that you worked hard, you had brilliant insight, whatever. And don't get me wrong, people do work hard and have brilliant insights, but I think that, if one were really honest, you would also understand that a lot of it is just the luck of the draw. That that's I don't, I mean, take an extreme case. I don't know if Bill Gates were born in the middle of a third world country, completely impoverished, one of 6 children. It's not clear to me that he would be where he is today.
Yeah.
I don't care how smart he is.
Yeah. What are some mistakes you've made looking back?
Well, I left Apple twice. I turned Steve Jobs down for another job. That's 3. I declined to interview for the first CEO position of Yahoo. So right there, that's
why did you why did you turn Steve down for the
Well,
third job?
partially it was at a time where, who knew if Apple would succeed? And I mean, you could make the case that anybody, I was employee number 5,041 at Apple. And you could make the case that anyone who left Apple in the last, I don't know, well, I left Apple the second time in 1997. So let's say, if you left Apple in the last 20 years, you made a mistake. I mean, but who among us knew that Apple would become $1 trillion company? I mean, obviously, if I knew that, I would have stuck around, right? But who knew? So, partially I turned him down because I didn't think Apple would succeed. And also because I didn't want to deal with the bullshit. You definitely have to buy into the reality distortion field there.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that there's a certain Apple way, and you have to, like, with a big personality like Steve, let's just say it's not a democracy, it's a benign autocracy.
So it's kind of one way or the highway kind of thing.
More or less. And now it's just very fortunate that, with Steve Jobs, one way or the highway, but Steve Jobs was right most of the time. One way or the highway is not that hard. It's one way or the highway, and the highway is excuse me, so let's say it again. One way or the highway is not that hard if the one way is right. That's the hard part, is making sure that the one way, the autocrat, is right. There are a lot of autocrats in the world. There are a lot of dictators. There are a lot of, egomaniac CEOs, but that's a dime a dozen. One is in a criminal trial right now, but the hard part is being right, not being autocratic.
How do you think, in obviously one of his more famous speeches at the Stanford commencement, when he talks about kind of connecting the dots looking back, how do you think he had that vision looking forward that this was going to work? Was he just going to make it work, or
I'm a mere mortal. I cannot explain the Steve Jobs phenomena. He certainly was probably more right than any other CEO in the history of American business. Maybe Elon Musk is rivaling him, maybe even surpassed Steve, but Steve Jobs was right most of the time. And you cannot say that about very many CEOs. So that's one of the dangers of looking at Steve Jobs as an example, which is, you look at him and you say, all right, so he was difficult to work for. He was arrogant. He wore blue jeans, black mock turtleneck. He drove, sometimes he drove a Mercedes, sometimes he drove a Porsche. He would drive these in the carpool lane by himself. He'd park in the handicap slot, and so you look at all those things, you say, okay, so I'm going to buy black mock turtleneck. I'm going to buy, jeans. I'm going to wear New Balance tennis shoes. I'm going to buy a Mercedes. I'm going to park in the handicap slot, and I'll be a Steve Jobs. Not really. You'll just be an asshole.
That's an interesting. There's probably some of those intangibles that just no one can get. Right?
I would say that there are some intangibles. That's like saying there's fish in the ocean. Yeah, there are some.
Well, is there, and I know there's probably a lot of stuff, but anything off the top of your head you're thinking of that maybe one of the lessons or two that you learned from working for him?
I learned from Steve that your current customer cannot really tell you how to revolutionize the business. Most of the time, if not all the time, your current customer will tell you how to make something better, faster, cheaper of what you already do. So, no Apple II owner said make a Macintosh, and no Macintosh owner said make iOS, and no iOS person is telling Apple to do what's next. I don't know who's telling Apple what's next. So I hope somebody is, but it's very difficult to ask a customer, how do we revolutionize the world? That it takes luck, and it takes a Steve Jobs, it takes vision, it takes luck. I really think so.
Well, one of the things, and again, I saw that you had said in the past about kind of getting, and maybe I'm going to botch this, but like getting to the next curve, kind of seeing beyond. Can you share, again, folks that are starting companies, whether they're early stage or they're moving forward, thinking differently about not trying to solve maybe a problem that exists today, but looking ahead?
Yeah.
Any thoughts for them?
Well, I mean, if you look at it, and the example I always cite is ice. So ice 1.0 was ice harvesting, frozen lake or pond. Ice 2.0 was ice factory, freezing water, any city, any time of year, essentially. Ice 3.0 was refrigerator. And so to truly be revolutionary, you would have gone from harvesting to factory to refrigerator, but nobody did that because most companies define their business in terms of what they already do. So if you define yourself as a harvester, you don't embrace factory. If you define yourself as a factory, you don't embrace, guess what, refrigerator. And in 1975, an engineer at Kodak invented digital photography. Well, guess what? I mean, can you imagine him going to his boss saying, I figured out a way people don't have to buy film anymore? Well, that went over really big, I bet. So, and yet, if Kodak had jumped to the next curve and embraced digital photography, who knows how big they would be, right? And so that's the difficult thing, because no customer buying Kodak film was saying, I want a system where I don't have to buy film and it's on a digital sensor and it's instant feedback and I print, after the fact, only the few, I don't have to develop the entire roll. Nobody was saying that because it was just, that's like asking a fish to describe what it's like to fly, although there are flying fish, but it's just not in their scope. And so that's where the action really is. And that's the hardest thing of all.
Do you feel, though, that's why probably a lot of smaller companies they're more nimble? They can kind of make those bets, if you will.
In a sense, they have to make that bet, right? Because you're not going to outfilm Kodak.
Yeah.
And so they have to make that bet. They don't have the 90-day financial return problem of a publicly traded company. They also don't have the inertia where the sales force is selling film, the engineers are making film, the manufacturers are making film. I mean, everything is geared towards film. And all of a sudden you're going to say, all right, guess what, guys, we're going to do digital sensors. That ain't going to happen. So the two guys in a garage, two gals in a garage, a guy and a gal in a garage have a certain set of advantages. No install base, no garbage to carry, no baggage to carry, unencumbered by old techniques and, closed-minded thinking, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, two guys or gals in a garage, they don't have capital, they don't have brand awareness, they don't have employees, they don't have anything. So, I mean, the grass is always greener.
Just a couple more questions. I'm gonna get you out on those waves.
All right.
I know you're itching for it, but I did want to talk on kind of two other topics. And one, I don't know how much you talk about if you do it all, but could we chat about parenting for a minute? Is that okay?
Parenting?
Yes. And here's what
help you.
Here's what I wanted to ask about this, because I'm not sure if you guys ask this a lot. So I have a 9-year-old, and when I talk to a lot of folks that are entrepreneurs or founders or whatever, they do some things a little different with their kids in terms of getting them thinking differently, again, showing the world's a bigger place than maybe it is. So I'm curious, did you do anything raising kids, anything that maybe would be helpful for folks out there to get their kids thinking? Because I think if we get them started at a younger age thinking differently, that could really make that monumental for them.
I don't consider myself an expert in parenting at all. And I would say some thoughts I have, not necessarily recommendations. Some thoughts are that I think that you should just enable your children to have a broad exposure to things. And so to enable them to find interesting things, as opposed to passion. I think passion is too high a bar. When you say you have to have a passion for something, it means like you've singularly focused. At 6 years old, you develop a passion for violin and you're going to be a violinist for the rest of your life. I think that's utter bullshit. So I think the parent should expose kids to a lot of things. Some interests will come, some will go. And over the course of a few decades, some interests will turn into true passions. You should, knock on wood, be so lucky that happens. But it's about exposure. And, I don't think parents should live through their kids. I'm not forcing my kids to become Macintosh evangelists or marketers or social media. And I'm not forcing them to become surfers because I love surfing. Actually, they love surfing, so I took up surfing. So I work completely the opposite.
Yeah.
So, when you go to these athletic events in particular, or anything. I mean, if you go to athletic events, or I would suppose it applies to spelling bees and all that too, where the parents are there, and I mean, who's that kid playing hockey for? The parent or the kid? I mean, and I mean, if you just look at mathematically, so let's take hockey. So I don't know, there are 2 million kids in Canada playing hockey. How many are going to end up professional hockey players? I don't know, 1,000, 500. So 500 out of 2 million. That's not good odds. On the other hand, how many engineers does Google have? I don't know, 250,000. So there's 250,000 engineers. It'd be much smarter to teach your kids to program than to play hockey. It's just statistically, it's a lot better bet. But go find me the parent is like cheering his kid or her kid on as an engineer or a STEM. I don't know.
Would you agree though? And part of the reason I asked is that, to your point, is try things, test, taste things. And by the way, you may not like them, but that's okay. You can at least check it off the list. Like, I've done it. And to your point, I think I hear this a lot is like, yeah, I'm going to put my kid in insert whatever, baseball, tennis, hockey. And then they're going to do that for 13 straight years. Well, now they hate it when they're 19 and they have no other skills, right?
Right. I think that is a big mistake. And, I got to tell you though, it's a fine line between forcing a kid to do something that he or she doesn't want to do versus letting a kid give up too easily. So I interviewed someone named Angela Duckworth for my podcast, and she had a very interesting test. She said that, her kids can quit anything, but they have to quit at a high point, right? So if you take an extreme example. So if you took up hockey and, you played for a few years and you loved it, and I don't know, all of a sudden you weren't on the first line and you weren't in the, AAA club and you weren't scouted and all that. So you quit because you feel like you're a loser. That would be quitting as a loser. You need to quit on a high. So after you win the championship, quit. That's when you should quit. So I tell you, when my podcast has got 5 million subscribers, I'm going to quit. That's when I'm quitting.
Just drop the mic and you're done. Yeah.
That's it. Aloha oi.
Well, last thing I appreciate your insight there. But last thing I wanted to ask you was about what you're doing. You said you're semi-retired, but the decision to go to Canva and do some of the stuff with them, I don't know if there was a certain reason that you did that. I know when I was, again, doing some research, I saw one of the things you did, I think, learn from Steve was around design counts. Like, that's a huge part of it. So I don't know if that was part of it, like seeing the future of here, but I'm curious if you can share kind of why the decision to go that route.
Well, Canva found me because my social media maven, who does much of my social media, or was doing much of my social media, she was using Canva. And so she was using Canva to make graphics for tweets. And so they contacted me because they noticed that. And when they contacted me, I just double checked with her and I said, isn't this the thing we use? Yep. Do you like it? Yep. Should I help them? Yep. And the rest is history. So, I mean, even that, was that, I don't want to give people the impression that Guy Kawasaki was like doing this extensive, intellectual, programmatic, well-designed survey of potential new companies and technologies and settled upon Canva with great decision and precision and, McKinsey-esque insights. That would be total, utter bullshit. They found me, my assistant said, you ought to help them. And the rest is history. That's how it went down. And, I don't know how you attribute that to anything but luck or I, at least I was smart enough to have a great assistant who knew graphics better than I did.
Why did you, so you could have said no. What was the reason you said yes?
Because A, she said, yes, you should help them. And B, it did not take a great intellectual capability to figure out, if this is true and many more people can make graphics than using Photoshop, that's a good thing. I mean, Duh. Like if everybody Photoshop for the rest of us, duh. That's like saying Macintosh, anybody can use a Macintosh. Not everybody could use MS-DOS. Well, duh, of course that's a good thing. So, life is sometimes full of duhism, especially looking backwards.
Well, that's a good point, and maybe something to end on around that. And I'd like to ask, kind of getting started advice. Someone getting started today, again, they could be starting a business, they could be wanting to start a garden. It doesn't matter. They have a Post-it note they're putting on their computer. They're going to look at it every day. What piece of advice would you put on that Post-it note to share with them to kind of get them motivated and inspired?
I would say, stop looking at that note and get to work. How's that?
Oh, that's good. That's great. Well, you got to put the work.
I'll give you a better one. So
no, it's
I think that you need to empathize with people, and empathy means, put yourself in their place. What kind of pain can you solve, or what kind of supplement can you provide? But it's empathy. Now, and that does not preclude the fact that these people may not be able to describe what they need. So that's not contrary to what I said about your current customers have a very difficult time explaining how to revolutionize a business. If you were in the shoes of people using MS-DOS or Unix or something, you probably could have empathized and say, my God, it is so hard to configure this and do this. There should be a better system. There should be a more user-friendly system. That's empathy. That would have led to Macintosh. So now the person using Unix or MS-DOS might not be able to articulate that it's WYSIWYG, trash can icon, point and click, mouse, all that kind of stuff. But so that's why you can't get that level of detail, but you should be able to empathize and say, man, this is way too hard. There's got to be a better way to do computing than what people are doing.
One question on that, if I could, I'm going to take a slight side road. But so when someone's going that route, at what point do you involve the customers and accept their feedback?
Right after you ship. I mean, right before you ship, but it's very hard because, this is kind of being sarcastic, but if you went to an Apple II user early in the development of Macintosh and said, how would you like a new computer where all the software you've just bought is not used? And so you have to buy all new software, and there's going to be this thing called a mouse, and it has a button in it, and that's how you move the cursor around. And, it's going to be able to print in multiple fonts. What's a font? It's going to be able to draw graphics. Why would I need to draw graphics? I just need a spreadsheet. I need rows and columns. I mean, so I don't know how you ask people about something that is so different. It would be like saying to someone, so, you haven't surfed. Well, let me tell you something. So you're going to get in the water, and it's going to be the hardest thing you ever tried. And for like the first year, you won't even be able to stand up, but ultimately you'll love it. I mean, how many people do you think are going to take up surfing when you describe it that way? So that's what it takes.
So get it out there and then offer the opportunity for feedback.
That's one method, but another method is build what you want to use. Build what you want to use, and just hope that you're not the only psychopath in the world who wants to use it.
That's a good way to end this one. Okay. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I certainly appreciate you coming on, and I know we went on some randomness, so I hope that was okay.
Random is good.
But I appreciate it, and thanks so much. And Guy, remind everyone where they could find the podcast.
Okay, the second best podcast in the world, first one being the one we're on recording right now, is called Remarkable People, and you just go to remarkablepeople.com, and there you'll find 200 interviews of the most remarkable people you ever will encounter.
Thanks again, Guy. I appreciate it.
All right, take care. Have a good week.